Cassian Vance didn't mind the biting New York wind. It was the silence of his 5-year-old daughter that felt like a knife in his ribs. He stood in the shadow of the Sterling Global Tower, a black man in a faded army jacket, holding a mop in one hand and his daughter's trembling hand in the other. Inside, the lobby smelled of expensive perfume and old money, a world that wanted him invisible. But as the elevator doors slid open, revealing a 25-year-old blonde woman with eyes like ice and a soul made of steel, Cassian didn't know that in exactly 60 seconds, his life as a nobody would end. He was about to be humiliated in front of everyone, but he was also carrying a secret in his pocket, a piece of twisted metal from a war zone that would make this powerful CEO drop to her knees and whisper the one sentence no one expected to hear. Welcome to Sterling Stories. If you're here for stories that hit deep and stay with you, you're in the right place. Before we begin, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you're new to the channel and don't want to miss our next emotional journey, hit that subscribe button and join the Sterling family. Now, let's get back to Cassian. The cold bit through Cassian Vance's worn jacket like a living thing with teeth. He stood outside Sterling Global's glass tower at 5:47 a.m., watching his breath turn to ghosts in the pre-dawn dark. The building rose 70 stories into a sky that promised snow. A monument to money, power, and the kind of life he'd stopped dreaming about 3 years ago when the IED took his leg and his wife in the same blood-soaked month. The windows reflected the streetlights like 1,000 indifferent eyes, watching but never seeing the man who cleaned their floors. New York in January was unforgiving. The wind came off the Hudson with a cruelty that seemed personal, slicing through the gaps in his second-hand jacket, finding the places where the seams had started to fail. He'd tried to patch them himself, his fingers clumsy with the needle. Sarah would have done it better. Sarah would have made the stitches invisible. But Sarah was 3 years in the ground at Arlington, and he was here, and the jacket was falling apart just like everything else. "Daddy, my feet hurt." Zoe's small voice cut through his thoughts like a sniper round. Precise, devastating, impossible to ignore. She stood beside him in sneakers 2 sizes too big, donations from the church on Amsterdam Avenue where they sometimes went for the free meals. Her coat was clean but threadbare, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, a casualty of too many nights spent clutching it for comfort in shelters and the back seats of cars and the various places they'd lived before he'd finally scraped together enough for the efficiency apartment in the Bronx. At 5 years old, she already knew not to complain. That broke him more than the poverty itself. More than the pain in his leg that never quite went away. More than the looks he got from people like the ones who worked in this building. Looks that said he was invisible. Or worse, that he was visible, but didn't matter. "I know, baby girl." He knelt down, ignoring the spike of pain in his prosthetic. The doctors at the VA had said it would get better. They'd been wrong about a lot of things. "Just a few more minutes, then you can sit in the warm lobby while Daddy works. I brought you some crackers for breakfast." 4 saltines in a plastic baggie. That's what breakfast looked like now. Her dark eyes, Sarah's eyes, so dark they were almost black, with that same searching quality that used to make him feel like she could see straight through to his soul, studied his face with that unsettling wisdom children of trauma develop too early. She was looking for the lie. She was getting good at finding them. Will the mean lady be there? Cassian's jaw tightened. The mean lady. Seraphina Sterling. 25 years old and colder than the January wind that was currently trying to freeze them both to death on this corner. He'd been mopping her building's marble floors for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of arriving before dawn and leaving after the sun set. 6 weeks of pushing a mop bucket and emptying trash cans and scrubbing toilets used by people who made more in an hour than he made in a month. And in all that time, she'd looked through him exactly once, the day he'd accidentally touched her Louboutin heel with his mop bucket. "Watch where you're going," she'd said, her voice like cut glass. Not to him. Not really. More like she was commenting on a piece of furniture that had inconveniently placed itself in her path. She hadn't waited for a response. She'd simply stepped around him and continued on, trailing perfume that probably cost more than his rent, and an aura of such absolute self-assurance that it seemed to push the air aside. "Maybe she won't be in yet," he lied. He'd never been good at lying to Zoe. Sarah used to say their daughter had inherited his gift for reading people, something the army had cultivated and war had sharpened to a razor's edge. Zoe nodded, but they both knew better. Seraphina Sterling was always there by 6:30, a blur of blonde hair and designer perfection, her heels clicking across the lobby like a countdown to someone else's irrelevance. She moved through the world like someone who'd never been told no, never been denied, never had to wait for anything or anyone. Cassian had known people like that before. Officers who'd never seen combat, politicians who visited the front lines for photo ops and then flew home to their comfortable lives. He'd learned not to hate them. Hate took energy he didn't have anymore. Inside, the warmth hit them like a promise the world couldn't keep. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth. Marble imported from Italy, gold fixtures that gleamed under lighting designed to make everything look like it belonged in a magazine, and a chandelier that probably cost more than Cassian would earn in a lifetime of mopping floors. The ceiling soared 30 feet above them, making him feel small in a way that combat never had. In war, he'd known his place. He'd been a weapon, precisely calibrated, essential. Here, he was just another body, easily replaced, barely noticed. Raymond, the security guard, glanced up from his desk. He was 60-something, with the face of a man who'd seen too much and cared about too little. His uniform was crisp. He took pride in it, one of those details Cassian noticed because he'd been trained to notice everything. Raymond had a bronze star from Desert Storm on his desk, partially hidden behind a coffee mug. They'd never talked about it. Men like Raymond didn't talk about their wars. "Vance, kid can't keep sitting here every morning. Building management's going to notice." Cassian felt his chest tighten. "Where else is she supposed to go, Ray? Daycare doesn't open until 7:30. Raymond's expression didn't change. He had the neutral face of someone who'd worked security for too long, who'd learned that sympathy was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Not my problem. Just giving you a heads up. Mrs. Chen from HR was asking questions yesterday. Said some of the executives have complained about unauthorized persons in the lobby during business hours. It's 6 a.m. There are no business hours at 6 a.m. You know how it is?" Raymond shrugged, and Cassian did know. He knew exactly how it was. The rules were different for people like him. Always had been. Always would be. Cassian guided Zoe to the bench near the entrance, the one partly hidden by a massive fern that probably required its own full-time caretaker. She sat without protest, pulling out a coloring book so worn the pages were soft as fabric. He'd found it in a free box outside a bookstore in Brooklyn, had carried it home on the subway, feeling like he'd won some kind of victory. She'd colored the same pages 17 times now, layering colors on top of colors until the paper was thick with crayon wax. She never complained that she didn't have new pages. She never complained about anything. "I'll be back in 10 minutes, he said, crouching down so they were eye level. "Stay quiet, okay? If anyone asks, you tell them your daddy works here and he'll be right back." "Okay, Daddy." She looked up at him and he saw the question in her eyes, the one she was too afraid to ask. "Are we going to be okay?" He kissed her forehead. "I love you, baby girl." "Love you too." He grabbed his cleaning cart from the service elevator, the wheels squeaking in a way that announced his presence in every hallway. The cart was old, older than him probably, with a broken wheel that made it pull to the left. He'd requested a new one from facilities management 3 times. They'd told him they'd get to it. They never got to it. He began his route. 3rd floor. Conference rooms that smelled like coffee and ambition. The coffee was from beans that cost $40 a pound. He'd seen the invoice once, left carelessly on a counter. $40 for a pound of coffee. He fed his daughter for a week on $40. The conference tables were mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. The chairs were leather, the kind that probably cost $1,000 each. He cleaned them all, moving with the efficiency of a soldier, precise, invisible, erasing the evidence of other people's success. In conference room B, someone had left a half-eaten croissant on a napkin. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. A hot dog from a cart, split with Zoe. He stared at the croissant for a long moment, then threw it in the trash. He had his pride. It was about the only thing he had left. The work was methodical. Empty the trash cans, wipe down the surfaces, vacuum the floors, check the bathrooms, refill the paper towels and soap, repeat. He could do it in his sleep now. Sometimes he wondered if he was doing it in his sleep. The days had started to blur together, one indistinguishable from the next, marked only by Zoe's slow growth and the changing seasons and the bills that never stopped coming. At 6:32, he heard the heels. He was back on the ground floor, wiping down the reception desk, when the sound echoed through the lobby. Click, click, click. Each footfall sharp and precise, like drum beats announcing the arrival of someone important. He didn't have to look up to know who it was. Seraphina Sterling entered through the revolving door like she owned the air itself. Probably did, he thought. Sterling Global wasn't just her company. It was her inheritance, her birthright, her kingdom. She'd taken over as CEO at 23 after her father's sudden death, and according to the business magazines he sometimes glanced at in the bodega, she'd tripled the company's value in 2 years. She was ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. She was wearing a white coat that probably cost more than his car, the one he'd sold 3 months ago to pay for Zoe's ear infection medication. Beneath it, a black dress that fit like it had been engineered specifically for her body. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a way that made her look like she'd been carved from ice and given just enough warmth to pass as human. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Perfect, polished, completely devoid of any imperfection or vulnerability. Behind her trailed 2 assistants, both of them typing frantically on tablets, trying to match her pace. She was speaking rapidly, her voice crisp and utterly devoid of warmth, firing off instructions like bullets. Tell Kaufman his bid is insulting. Tell Mercer if he misses another deadline, he's done. And someone find out why the Tokyo office thinks they can ignore my directives. I want Henderson on a plane today. Today, not tomorrow. And get me the Fitzgerald contracts by noon or... She stopped. Zoe had wandered from behind the fern. She was standing directly in Seraphina's path, staring up at her with those 2 old eyes, clutching her rabbit. The rabbit's remaining ear was bent at an odd angle, giving it a permanently surprised expression. For a moment, nobody moved. The assistants froze. Raymond looked up from his newspaper. Cassian, still 20 feet away, felt his blood turn to ice. Move, Seraphina said. Not cruel, just factual. The way you'd tell a door to open or a light to turn on. She didn't understand that this was a child, a human being, someone's entire world. Zoe didn't move. She was 5. She didn't understand that women like Seraphina Sterling expected the world to rearrange itself around them, that the very concept of someone not immediately obeying was foreign to her existence. Cassian saw it happening from across the lobby. He moved fast, but the prosthetic made him slower than he used to be. There was a hitch in his gait, a split-second delay between thought and action that hadn't existed before the IED. Before, he could have crossed this distance in seconds. Now, Each step was a negotiation between his brain and the metal and plastic that had replaced his leg below the knee. He was still 20 feet away when Seraphina's patience, thin as paper, fragile as glass, ran out. "Security," she called, not loudly but with absolute authority, the voice of someone who'd never been disobeyed in her life. "Remove this child from the building." Raymond stood up, uncomfortable but obedient. He'd been taking orders his whole life, from sergeants, from officers, from bosses. He knew better than to question them now. "Wait!" Cassian reached them, his heart hammering against his ribs. "She's with me." "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Zoe, come here, baby." Seraphina's gaze slid to him for the first time in weeks, really looked at him. He saw the moment of recognition, not of him as a person, but as the janitor, the help, the furniture that occasionally needed to be told where to stand. Her blue eyes were the color of a winter sky, cold and clear and absolutely merciless. "You brought your child to work?" Her tone made it sound like a moral failing, like he'd committed some unforgivable sin against the natural order of things. "My daycare doesn't open until 7:30, and I don't care." She cut him off with the precision of a scalpel. "This is a place of business, not a daycare center. Figure it out or find employment elsewhere. We have standards here." Standards. The word hung in the air like an accusation. He didn't meet their standards. His daughter didn't meet their standards. Their poverty, their desperation, their very existence was somehow offensive to the polished marble and gold fixtures and $40 coffee. One of her assistants, a thin woman with apologetic eyes and the kind of face that suggested she'd once had dreams before this job had worn them down, whispered something urgently. "No," Seraphina said, not even looking at her. "No exceptions. Standards exist for a reason. If we allow this, what's next? Everyone bringing their children to work? Their pets? Their extended families? Lines must be drawn." She said it like she was talking about policy, about maintaining professional boundaries. She had no idea what she was really saying, that his daughter didn't deserve to be warm, that his struggle to survive was an inconvenience, that people like them, people who had to choose between rent and food, between heat and medicine, were simply obstacles to be removed from her pristine world. Zoe's lip trembled. Cassian recognized the signs. She was going to cry, and once she started, the nightmares would come back. The ones where she screamed for her mother, where she woke up sobbing and wouldn't be comforted for hours. The ones that left them both exhausted and hollow-eyed the next day. He picked up his daughter, feeling the weight of her against his chest. She was so light. Too light. He'd had to choose between the heating bill and groceries twice this month. He'd chosen heat because January in New York would kill you faster than hunger. A cold apartment was better than a hungry child. Or was it? He couldn't tell anymore. The calculations had become impossible. Every choice was wrong. Every day was just choosing which disaster to postpone. "I understand, ma'am," he said quietly, with all the dignity he could muster. His voice didn't shake. The army had taught him that, at least. How to maintain composure when everything inside you was breaking. "I'll handle it." He turned to leave, carrying Zoe toward the door, toward the brutal cold, toward another day of impossible choices. He'd lose this job. He knew it. Raymond would report it, or the HR woman would follow up, or Seraphina Sterling would simply decree it, and it would be done. He'd lose this job. And then what? How long before they lost the apartment? How long before they were back in the shelters? Or worse, in the car he no longer owned, or worse still, separated because he couldn't prove he could provide for her. And that's when it happened. The metal. It must have worked its way out of his jacket pocket, the one he kept safety pinned inside because he couldn't afford to lose the only thing he had left from before, the silver star. They'd given it to him for the mission in Syria. Operation Righteous Fury, they'd called it. Like giving something a noble name made the blood and death and screaming somehow worthwhile. The one with the kidnapped American executives, 3 of them held by a militia group in a compound outside Damascus. The one that had ended with 3 of his squad dead and Cassian carrying a 20-year-old girl through a burning building while taking fire from all sides. Call sign V782. That's what they'd called him. On comms that night. Vance. 7th Company. 82nd Airborne. The metal hit the marble with a sound like a gunshot. In the silence that followed, Cassian heard his own breathing, loud and harsh. He heard Zoe's small whimper against his shoulder. He heard the hum of the building's heating system, and the distant sound of traffic outside, and the rustle of one of the assistant's papers. Everyone stopped. Seraphina Sterling looked down at the silver star lying at her feet, gleaming against the white marble. Her face, that perfect, cold, untouchable face, went absolutely white. The color drained from her cheeks like someone had opened a valve. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes, those cold blue eyes, suddenly went very wide. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was different now. Shaking. Raw. Human. Cassian stared at her, confused. "It's mine. Your call sign." She wasn't asking. Her hands were trembling. He could see them shaking, her fingers curling and uncurling. "What was your call sign?" The lobby had gone silent. Even Raymond was watching now, his newspaper forgotten. The assistants had stopped typing. The world had contracted to just this moment. This woman. This question. V-782, Cassian said slowly, his mind racing, trying to understand what was happening. Vance. 7th Company. 82nd Airborne. "Ma'am, I don't understand. Oh my God." Seraphina Sterling, the Ice Queen of Manhattan, the woman who'd just threatened his job with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly, sat down hard on the marble floor in her $1,000 coat. She didn't seem to notice or care that she was sitting on the ground in the middle of her own lobby, that her employees were watching, that her carefully maintained image of perfect control was shattering. She looked up at him with eyes that had suddenly become human, vulnerable, terrified and grateful, and filled with something that looked like it might be tears. "You saved my life," she whispered. 10 years ago. Syria. The compound. Her voice broke. "I was the girl. The one you carried out. I was 20 years old and I thought I was going to die and you came through the fire and you..." The memories hit Cassian like a flashback. The smell of smoke and burning flesh. The sound of automatic weapons fire. The weight of a young woman in his arms. Her blonde hair matted with blood. Her eyes wide with terror. The way she'd clutched his vest and whispered, "Please don't let me die. Please, please, please," over and over like a prayer. He'd never known her name. They'd evacuated her to a medical facility and he'd gone back to base, and 3 days later the IED had taken his team, and he'd never thought about her again. Couldn't think about her. Thinking about the people you saved meant thinking about the people you hadn't saved, and that way lay madness. Zoe buried her face in Cassian's neck, confused and frightened by the sudden change in the air, by the strange intensity of this moment, and for the first time in 3 years, Cassian Vance had absolutely no idea what to do. Seraphina Sterling was crying. Actually crying. Tears running down her perfect face, her mascara starting to smudge. She reached out toward him with one shaking hand, then pulled it back. Then reached out again like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "I looked for you," she said, her voice breaking. I tried to find you. They wouldn't tell me your name. Security protocols. I only had your call sign, V782. I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten you." The assistants looked at each other, bewildered. Raymond was standing now, his hand on his chest, his face showing the first real emotion Cassian had seen from him. Shock and something that might have been respect. "Ma'am," Cassian said quietly because he didn't know what else to say. I was just doing my job." "No." She shook her head violently, still sitting on the floor, still looking up at him like he was something holy. "No, you saved my life. You carried me through fire. You told me," she laughed, a broken sound. "You told me to stay awake. You told me about your daughter. You said you had a little girl at home and you were going to get back to her and I was going to get back to my family and we were both going to live. You made me believe it." Zoe had been 2 years old then. Sarah had been alive. He'd had a future. "I'm glad you made it out," he said, and meant it. "I'm glad you're okay." "Okay?" She looked around the lobby, at her building, at her employees, at the empire she'd built. "I'm not okay. I've never been okay. I've been—" She stopped, seeming to realize for the first time that she was sitting on the floor of her own lobby, crying in front of her staff. She stood up quickly, wiping at her eyes, trying to reassemble the Ice Queen mask, but it wouldn't fit right anymore. Something had broken. She looked at Zoe, really looked at her, seeing the worn coat and the 2 big shoes and the stuffed rabbit and the way the child clung to her father with the desperate grip of someone who'd learned that security was temporary and could be taken away at any moment. "What's your daughter's name?" Seraphina asked softly. "Zoe," Cassian said. "Zoe." Seraphina said it like she was testing the word. She crouched down, graceful even in her distress, so she was at Zoe's eye level. "I'm sorry I was mean to you, Zoe. That was wrong. Will you forgive me?" Zoe looked at her father. He nodded. She looked back at Seraphina and said, in that solemn voice children use when they're trying to be adult, "It's okay. Sometimes people are mean when they're scared." Seraphina Sterling blinked, and another tear ran down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, they are." She stood up, and when she looked at Cassian now, everything had changed. The world had shifted on its axis. The Ice Queen had melted, and neither of them knew what came next. Seraphina Sterling's office occupied the entire 70th floor. Cassian stood by the window, Zoe asleep in his arms, looking down at the city that had chewed him up and spit him out. Behind him, Seraphina was on her 3rd phone call in 10 minutes, her voice sharp and commanding, back to the woman who ran empires. But something was different now. There was a fracture in the ice. "I don't care what the board thinks, Marcus. Make it happen." She ended the call and turned to him. "I'm setting up a trust fund for Zoe. Full ride to any university she wants. Medical, dental, everything." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no. He turned to face her, careful not to wake his daughter. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, I do, but I'm not a charity case." "This isn't charity. You saved my life. I was a soldier. You were a mission objective, that's all." Her face flushed. "That's all. You carried me through fire while people were shooting at you. You almost died. People almost die in war. It's what we signed up for." He shifted Zoe's weight, feeling the familiar ache in his back. "What you're offering, it's guilt money. You want to feel better about how you treated me this morning. That's not fair. Isn't it?" His voice was quiet but steel hard. "An hour ago I was furniture. Now I'm a hero? Which one am I, Ms. Sterling? Or do I only matter because I'm useful to your conscience?" She sat down heavily in her chair. For a long moment she just looked at him. Really looked. Seeing, perhaps for the first time, not the janitor or the soldier, but the man. "You're right," she said finally. "I was cruel. I've been cruel for a long time. After Syria, after what happened, I built walls. I made myself cold because cold people don't get hurt. Cold people don't get kidnapped and tortured, and..." Her voice broke. "I became someone I don't like very much. That's not my problem to fix. No. But maybe you can teach me something." She stood, walked to the window beside him. What's it like? To have nothing but still have everything that matters? He looked down at Zoe, her face peaceful in sleep. It's hell. Don't romanticize poverty, Ms. Sterling. It grinds you down. It makes you choose between your child's medicine and your rent. It makes you wonder if she'd be better off without you. Then let me help. Why? So you can feel less guilty? So you can tell yourself, you paid your debt? He shook his head. I don't want your money. I want a chance. A real job, not cleaning toilets. I have skills. I managed logistics for an entire battalion. I can learn anything. Give me that. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Marcus? That operations manager position in supply chain. I want Cassian Vance in that role. Starting Monday. Yes, I know we haven't posted it yet. Just do it. I don't care what the board says. Tell them the CEO said so. She ended the call. $65,000 a year to start. Benefits. Real ones. Deal? That's charity with extra steps. No, she said firmly. That's me recognizing that I've been throwing away good people because I couldn't see past their circumstances. That's me learning from someone who knows what actually matters. She held out her hand. Deal? He looked at her hand for a long moment. Then he shifted Zoe carefully and shook it. Deal. But I earn this. You fire me if I don't perform. Fair enough. She smiled and it transformed her face. Made her look young. Human. Can I ask you something? What? That day in Syria. When you were carrying me out. You told me something. You said endurance is not the same as living. What did you mean? Cassian looked out at the city again. At the thousands of windows, each one containing someone's struggle, someone's joy, someone's story. I meant that surviving isn't enough. I've been surviving for 3 years. Getting by, enduring. But I wasn't living. I was just existing, going through motions. I think you've been doing the same thing. Building walls, being cold, calling it strength when really it's just fear. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. How do we start living again? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I think it starts with being honest, with being vulnerable, with letting people matter again. Zoe stirred in his arms, opened her eyes. She looked at Seraphina without fear now. Are you still scared? Seraphina knelt down. Yes, sweetheart. I am. But I'm trying not to let it make me mean anymore. That's good, Zoe said seriously. Daddy says brave isn't not being scared. Brave is being scared and being kind anyway. Cassian felt his throat tighten. He'd told her that after a nightmare, months ago. He hadn't known she remembered. Seraphina looked up at him, and he saw tears in her eyes again. She's brilliant, just like her father. She's brilliant like her mother, he corrected quietly. Understanding crossed Seraphina's face. I'm sorry. I didn't know. 3 years ago. Same month as the IED. He said it simply, without drama. Facts. Just facts. Some days I'm not sure which one took more from me. But you kept going. I had to. For her. He looked down at Zoe. She needed me to be more than my pain. More than my loss. She needed me to show her that you can break and still choose to be whole again. That you can fall and still choose to stand. Seraphina stood slowly. She walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a photograph. It was worn at the edges, clearly handled many times. She handed it to Cassian. It showed a young woman, 20 years old, blonde, smiling, standing with an older couple in front of this very building. Before Syria. Before fear had carved its lines into her face. That's who I used to be, she said. I want to find her again. Will you help me? That's not my job. No, but maybe we can help each other. She looked at Zoe. Maybe we all can. I don't know how to live again, Cassian, but I'd like to learn. He studied her face, saw the genuine hope there, the vulnerability, the woman beneath the Ice Queen. Okay, he said finally, but no more charity, no savior complex. We help each other as equals. You teach me how to navigate your world. I teach you how to be human in it. She held out her hand again. Partners? He shook it. Partners. 3 months later, Cassian stood in his new office.
I miss you so much, sweetheart.
Small, but his, looking out at the same city that had once seemed so hostile. Zoe was in a proper daycare now, one where kids painted pictures and learned songs and weren't afraid. He'd paid the first month himself. It had felt like victory. His phone buzzed, a text from Seraphina. Board meeting in 10. Wish me luck. Teaching them about seeing people instead of problems. It's harder than hostile negotiations. He smiled and typed back, "You've got this. Remember, brave is being scared and kind anyway." Her response came quickly. "Your daughter is a philosopher. Coffee after." "Sure, but you're buying. Operations managers don't make CEO money." "Fair enough." He put his phone away and picked up the photograph on his desk. Sarah, smiling, holding newborn Zoe. He'd finally been able to frame it properly. "I'm living again," he whispered to the image. "Not just surviving. Living. I think you'd be proud." The photo didn't answer, but the sunlight coming through the window felt like warmth, like approval, like grace. Endurance had kept him breathing, but it took breaking down, falling apart, and being seen in his worst moment to learn what he should have known all along. Strength isn't about walls, it's about bridges, and sometimes the people who save you are the ones you've already saved.